Good afternoon, everybody. So we're about to get underway. Those of you who are standing at the back, I think I can see one chair, or maybe it's taken. Is there a free? There's one free here. And otherwise, if you can find a chair for yourself, please do. My name is Alex White. I'm Director General here at the Institute. I'm delighted to welcome everybody here this afternoon to this event. Members of the Diplomatic Corps, Minister, distinguished guests, everybody is welcome. Everybody's a distinguished guest, really, but you're all welcome on this lovely summer's day to the Institute of International European Affairs. We're to have a discussion for the next hour or so on European security, and in particular the EU White Paper for Defence Readiness 2030. We're delighted to be able to host this discussion with the help of our friends in the European Commission representation, and thanks in particular to its relatively recently appointed head, Peter Power, and his staff for all of their work together with us in the preparation of this event. It's become almost trite to observe that we are living in uncertain times. From the challenges posed by Russia's aggression and the need to support Ukraine's self-defense to dealing with a more uncertain transatlantic relationship. In addition, we must address emerging and ever-present risks, not least the existential challenges posed by climate change. And in all of this, Europeans have to work together on each of these agendas, separate though they may seem, because I think it's necessary that we recognize that each of these agendas actually is more, they are all more closely connected and linked to each other than is often recognized. On the defence agenda, which is our particular focus today, the European Commission's White Paper for Defence Readiness 2030 highlights the risks that Europe faces and provides potential options to enable European member states to work together to increase their preparedness and defence readiness. To discuss how EU member states might work together to help better protect European citizens in all of this uncertainty and turmoil, I'm delighted to welcome our speakers. Our event moderator in particular, Catherine Day, former Secretary General of the European Commission and most valued board member here at the IIEA. And Catherine will moderate the session, will introduce the speakers shortly. And again, to welcome each and every one of you in attendance here today. To open the event, I'm particularly delighted and pleased to welcome Minister Thomas Byrne, Minister of State for European Affairs and Defence. Delighted to have you here, Thomas, if I may address you so, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Alex. Apologies, I turned out I had COVID last week, so I'm still a bit hoarse from that, but negative, thankfully, and well past the isolation, which I almost was by the time I decided it was worth testing for. But anyway, so look, thanks very much for the invitation to speak to you today, and I'm really glad to see Oireachtas members as well, the chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee, John Lahart, Senator Tom Clonan, and there may well be others. There are former Oireachtas members here as well, a number of them, Sean Haughey and Carl Berry, and probably Sonora Owen is there, and I'm sure there's a long list of other people that I just haven't seen. Members of the Defence Forces, distinguished guests, and members of the Diplomatic Corps as well, to thank you for all your work and your interest. It's not my first engagement with the IIEA, but when I was Minister the last time, I think my engagements were all virtual because it was Minister for European Affairs, because it was during COVID. I was here previously, randomly enough, as a backbencher addressing on the American presidential election in 2016, but maybe have more freedom to speak on the internal politics as not being a minister. So perhaps that's why they had non-ministers at that event. But anyway, I'm glad to be here, and it's a very important discussion. Again, the last time I was Minister for European Affairs, everything was Brexit, certainly from our point of view, and actually, to be fair, from my European colleagues' point of view as well. Brexit was a huge part of their agenda too, and we very much appreciated that at the time. But Brexit is still an issue, but it doesn't form part of the daily lexicon or the daily work. And my ministerial role now combines European affairs with defence as Minister of State. Security, in some ways, is, from that point of view, the new Brexit in terms of being such a dominant issue on our agendas. And I do welcome then the opportunity to put some of my own reflections and thoughts on the white paper on defence in addition to the security and defence situation that Ireland and Europe find themselves in. And I think it's very important to go back to first principles on all of this. And the first principle we have as a government minister is we read the Constitution. And under Article 29.1 of our Constitution, the international relations of Ireland are founded upon international justice and morality. We are committed constitutionally to the ideal of peace and friendly cooperation among nations. So we don't see ourselves as having a home in NATO, but we don't live in splendid isolation either. So I believe that if we're to approach the area of security and defence, we must do so from a point and a point of view policy of principles-based pragmatism. And in putting forward this, I believe that we must be pragmatic and realistic about the threats that we face, and also pragmatic about how we deal with those threats. But that sense of pragmatism must be rooted at all times in the constitutional and legal principles governing our state in Article 29 in this particular area. So I think that we need to continue the pace of increased investment in our security and defence capabilities. That's already underway, and we must continue to work with our European partners as well. I believe that we need to champion legislative reform governing the deployment of our defence forces, such as amending the triple lock where that's necessary. In undertaking these actions, we must do so in a manner that remains fully consistent with our legal principles and moral values as described in the Constitution as a nation. And our constitutional position is clear when it comes to any potential EU common defence. We can't join such a proposal if there were to be such a proposal. So our policy of military neutrality remains unchanged. And we will always act in accordance with our obligations under international law, and we will always demand of others that they act in accordance with our obligations under international law. But any bad actor won't hit our strengths, they will hit our vulnerabilities. And we simply cannot be locked into a state of stasis in responding to the geopolitical challenges and security defence risks, which keep changing, that face us. So at the outset today, I'm calling for a policy of principles-based pragmatism in how we approach our security and defence going forward. The white paper on European defence makes clear that Europe needs to invest more together to protect itself. The timing for such action could not be more pressing, and the need could not be more acute. Not only is terrible conflict taking place in Europe as we speak, but the fear of such conflict broadening to other parts of the continent is very real. Just last week, for example, I paid a very sobering visit to the largest underground shelter in Helsinki. Indeed, it's one of dozens of such massive shelters in Helsinki. So I was reminded of the threat felt by so many, particularly those like Finland who share a large land border with Russia. And the fear is not imagined in Europe. It's based on a considered analysis of existing threats by our European partners. And these threats include, first and foremost, Russia's ongoing illegal war in Ukraine. In the past week, Russia has carried out a series of brutal air attacks on Ukraine's cities and civilian infrastructure. In one attack this week alone, over 500 drones were deployed. Russian attacks have intensified and continue to intensify, despite Moscow's alleged commitment to entering negotiations. They're not the actions of a country committed to peace or interested in peace. And I witnessed at first hand, indeed, the impact of Russian barbarism in Ukraine, as well as the courage and bravery of the Ukrainian people in response when I visited Kyiv and Odessa in April. As I made clear in all my meetings during that visit, Ireland stands in full solidarity with Ukraine and its government in the face of the continuing brutal aggression. And from my bilateral meetings with ministers from Finland, Poland, the rest of Scandinavia, Baltic states, and Romania in particular, Moldova, I know that the threat posed by Russia is keenly felt by member states and those other countries adjacent. Russia's threat is real and tangible, and it must be taken seriously by the EU as a whole. I mean, they're a physical threat to many countries, but they're also a threat to our very democracy and our very way of life. And Mark Rutte, I don't think was exaggerating when he said, you know, if we don't get serious with some of these stuff, and again, I'm not saying because he's head of NATO or whatever. Like some people may have to start to learn to speak Russian, and these are real fears that people have all across Europe. Whether we agree with them or not, these are real fears that people have, and they're based on reason, based on common sense assessments by experts in those countries. In Helsinki last week as well, I visited the Hybrid Centre of Excellence, which Ireland has been a member of, thankfully, since 2023. As you know, we are seeing a significant increase in hybrid actions, malicious hybrid actions against the EU and our partners. In the past year, Russia has embarked on an increasingly reckless and intensified hybrid campaign against Europe, including electoral interference, disinformation, incendiary devices, GNSS, jamming and spoofing, damage to subsea maritime infrastructure, and economic and energy coercion. We've seen all of that. And as the white paper notes, hybrid threats and cyber attacks don't respect borders. And this point was also highlighted in our own defence policy review. And I'm glad to see that the European Union is acting together with greater decisiveness, ambition and speed to tackle such threats. Ireland must be a part of this process because the threats are existential for the way in which we live our lives across the European Union. And I want to assure everyone here today that the Irish government is committed to working with our fellow member states and the EU institutions to counter the hybrid threats posed to us all. I believe that the fundamental responsibility of government is to maintain and protect the security of its people. So domestically, the government is advancing a range of actions to ensure the security of our country, to enhance Ireland's resilience to hybrid threats, and to meet the challenges of the future. And like protecting the security of our people, it's a basic democratic function. Someone said to me recently enough that it was the main difference between being independent and being not independent. Was that you actually protected your own country. So we have seen the establishment of the Ministerial Council on National Security as announced by the Taoiseach in March. In April, the government launched Ireland's first national counter-disinformation strategy. And we are committed to producing a national security strategy and a national maritime security strategy. Continuous assessment on lessons learned from Russia's ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine will be key to building our capabilities to combat future threats, including through the use of technology and artificial intelligence. And the Irish defence budget has risen substantially to 1.35 billion in 2025, which is a 22% increase since the publication of the report on the Commission of the Defence Forces in 2022, and I want to thank them for their work. So this represents significant progress on the government's commitment to increase the defence budget to 1.5 billion euro by 2028 in 2022 prices as part of the annual budgetary process. And I will not shy away from the fact, and I have no doubt that others participating today won't shy away also, that the level of Irish expenditure on defence is lower than other EU member states. And this is something that the report on the Commission of Defence Forces, which the government itself commissioned, the government recognised, and that government that was established in 2020, we recognised it was a major issue, and that report made this clear. And in all my discussions on security and defence with my EU colleagues, and it comes up in every single meeting. In fact, when I met one particular interlocutor recently, the first question was, right, what's Ireland doing? Because they're all doing a lot. And what I've said, and I've said all along, I've said we've decided to increase expenditure significantly, but that our key focus in Ireland at the moment needs to be on identifying our capability gaps and closing those capability gaps. And that's a key responsibility of the government. It's not something we want to do, it's something we have to do. We do want to do it, but it's an obligation rather than a desire. A layered approach to our investment in security and defence is the best approach. We want to get the fundamentals right. Radar, we hear talked about, that's one of the fundamentals. We want to, for example, the ambassadors recently visited Gormeston Camp with me, where I'm really glad to see diggers on the ground, but that's significantly enhancing our training capacity. And there are lots of other examples around the place as well. Basic requirements to make sure that we have what our defence forces need. And the government is fully committed to increasing defence spending to meet the higher levels of ambition as set out in the Commission of the Defence Forces. But ultimately, our view is that the increase in defence expenditure should not become a target-driven process. And we know that no state acting alone can address the entirety of existing and emerging security challenges. Our defence policy review committed that Ireland will continue to play its part in supporting European security and defence. We believe that the White Paper presents Ireland with a unique opportunity to join with other EU member states to enhance our individual and collective preparedness and our capabilities across all areas of security and defence. There are certain capabilities that no member state can achieve alone, and so working together is the only way forward. At the same time, it's imperative that projects to develop these capabilities are open to all member states. Smaller EU member states like Ireland can be crowded out of supply chains when demand is increasing exponentially. And so there are immense benefits that we can get from joint procurement. And I do encourage increased cooperation at EU level in this respect. I also want to state my strong support for the inclusion of a chapter on help to Ukraine in the White Paper. In March, the government approved €100 million of bilateral non-lethal military support for Ukraine. These funds will be used to invest in priority areas identified by Ukraine, including through procurement from industry in Ukraine. And we will continue to look for further opportunities to support Ukraine so that it is able to defend itself against Russian aggression. I particularly welcome the fact that the White Paper aims to ensure that Ukraine gets the support it needs to defend itself, including through its industrial base. Supporting Ukraine is a moral obligation for us, and as I said, we're obliged to, under our constitution, to look to international principles, international law, moral principles, and how we guide our international policy, our foreign policy. But this is also a matter of our collective security. In fact, it's essential that Ukraine becomes a member of the European Union because it's the right thing to do, but also from our own security point of view as well. European security, of course, is also impacted by conflicts elsewhere in our wider neighbourhood. We're particularly conscious of the terrible toll of conflict in the Middle East and what's happening in Gaza, that utterly catastrophic humanitarian situation. And I want to take this opportunity to underline the urgent need for a ceasefire, our call for the return of all hostages, and for the immediate resumption, as the Taoiseach talked about, truckloads and truckloads of unimpeded humanitarian aid into and throughout Gaza. It strikes me that one of the defining aspects of this process is that the White Paper projects will all be voluntary projects. For our part, Ireland will consider joining projects in areas where capabilities and needs have been identified by our defence forces and by the department. Other member states may have wider interests, and it's been made clear in the White Paper that the positions of all member states will be respected, including those of us that are militarily neutral. And that's an important point to make always. When people say, "Oh, the European is militarising," it's not. I mean, it's the member states are making their own decisions in closer cooperation. But our stance as a militarily neutral nation is always recognised and always referred to. Later this month, I will accompany the Taoiseach to the European Council, where security and defence will lead the agenda. The priority for EU leaders will be to translate political decisions into a first list of tangible defence capability projects. Maritime security and critical infrastructure protection is an area of critical importance for us. And I expect that the Taoiseach will engage strongly in this area with his European counterparts. With an exclusive economic zone of close to 7 times our land area, maritime security is an essential domain of strategic importance for Ireland. It's a priority action area for the government as outlined in the Defence Policy Review. Recent geopolitical tensions have placed the topic of security and resilience of critical undersea infrastructure to the fore as concerns mount across industry and indeed at state level. And again, this is an issue that's raised in every single meeting that I have at bilateral level. We're also interested in the air and cyber domains, and Ireland is also open to exploring other areas of clear strategic importance should they provide pragmatic enhancements to our national and EU security and defence. When it comes to white paper projects, Ireland believes that the EU can only achieve the speed necessary to a lead nation approach to progressing projects, and we look forward to hearing proposals from other member states in terms of projects that they might want to lead on. Where they do align with our national priorities, it's our intention to explore these opportunities for accelerated delivery. I'm conscious that the June meeting of the European Council will take place immediately after the NATO summit at The Hague. We won't be at the NATO summit because we're not a member and there's absolutely no proposal to join NATO. But the timing of the NATO meeting will underscore the fact that coherence and complementarity with NATO will be part of the picture for those EU member states for whom NATO capability targets inform their capability needs. I am mindful, for example, that when I last held the role of European Affairs Minister, my colleagues in Helsinki and Stockholm were preparing for their own accession to NATO. But in taking a principles-based pragmatic approach to our security and defence, notwithstanding that we won't see a home for ourselves in NATO, I do believe that we should continue to partner with NATO within frameworks such as Partnership for Peace, of which we've been a member for many, many years. The partnership has proved successful for Ireland and has acted to improve the interoperability of our defence forces, including through our participation in UN and EU missions overseas. In respect of the Rearm Europe initiative, Ireland has taken a pragmatic and constructive approach, and we're supportive overall of the proposals outlined within it. We are open to member states using the National Escape Clause in the Stability and Growth Pact to enable greater national expenditure on defence. This is what they are asking for. Activation should be targeted and time-limited to avoid endangering fiscal sustainability, and we should watch any market response carefully. At the most recent General Affairs Council that I attended in Brussels, my colleagues and I adopted formally the SAFE regulation. In adopting this measure, we have enabled member states to access a loan mechanism to the value of €150 billion, which will aid in financing defence capability needs. From Ireland's perspective, as a significant net contributor to the EU budget, this financial assistance in the form of a loan is acceptable, as the liability for the repayment rests with the member states availing of the loan. Ireland is focused on developing our own national defence capabilities, and we want to transform our defence forces. We want to utilise our own budget resources, but we are assessing options for the potential utilisation of the SAFE facility in the future. We are in favour of a balanced approach on defence products, which recognises the need to develop a European industrial base to enhance European resilience. But equally, we must consider the existing procurement relationships and partnerships that many member states have. We should not develop new dependencies as we take the necessary steps to procure the capabilities that we need. And indeed, strengthening our own industrial base is of vital interest for us here in Ireland. But we must also avoid a big bang approach and instead opt for a gradual and sustainable reduction in reliance on third countries. We're all familiar with the saying that a week is a long time in politics, so it would be a brave person to predict where Europe will stand politically in a year's time. However, there is one certainty next year that Ireland does look forward to, and that's our presidency of the Council of the European Union. On the 1st of July next year, Ireland will be tasked with driving the agenda of the entire European Union. And that means we must take account of the needs of all member states, big and small, old and new. It will be a big agenda. And that agenda will undoubtedly concern our security and defence. The process of defining our presidency priorities is ongoing. But I can assure you that our European Council presidency will accommodate and reconcile the needs, perspectives and priorities of all our fellow member states. And that includes the security and defence of the European Union. One final reflection that I would like to offer today is that my experience to date is that every EU state, including Ireland, has its own nuance on almost every issue, but it certainly has on security and defence. There's a difference in almost every country, a national peculiarity, you might call it, or national idiosyncrasy. In fact, I was speaking at a debate a number of years ago with the then 5 neutral countries at the time, and each country that was neutral at that time within the European Union had a different experience of it, different reason for it, and a different intention for it. But even though we're all a bit different, we share a universal interest in securing the EU. What is the EU? The greatest peace project ever. It's our democracy, it's our way of life. And we want to defend our interests and our citizens. Our peace, our economic security, our people, our democracy, they're all worth defending. So the Irish government looks forward to progressing the White Paper's recommendations as we work together as member states to address the critical and pressing capability needs of the European Union. Ireland will step up in the face of these challenges, and I believe that we're doing so in that spirit of, as I described, of principles-based pragmatism. So let me again thank Alex and the IIEA and Catherine for hosting this discussion, and extend, of course, bienvenue à Guillaume de la Bousse aussi. I look forward also to listening to some of the ongoing dialogue today with you all, but I have other engagements to go to and I will have to leave at some point. So, Gurmina Magav, thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for those very interesting remarks. I think you've set the scene very well, including by bringing to life just how much your other EU colleagues are occupied with the question of defence and security when you meet them, but also in updating us on what Ireland is doing and explaining the approach that Ireland will follow. And I think that today's discussion organised by the IIEA and the European Commission office in Dublin is very timely, because at an EU level, we are in a situation today where the 70 years of peace and prosperity that we have enjoyed has been really shaken by what has happened in the last couple of years, and shaken in ways that we didn't imagine, and maybe more importantly, that we didn't prepare for. So we're now making up for lost time. And in Ireland, where, as you say, we, like every other member state, have our own particular take on the issues, we do need to discuss it. We need to bring the public along with the debate, and we need to decide, how do we react to what's going on in the outside world, and where do we position Ireland in all that's going on? And so I think today's panel is extremely well placed to help us look at the issues, but also maybe explore some of the ways forward and in helping us to decide where we might go from here. So we're going to start by hearing from Guillaume de la Brosse, who is Head of Unit for Defence Policy and Innovation in the European Commission. He will speak for about 10 minutes on the white paper on European defence that was published by the Commission in March, just a few months ago. And then I will invite our speakers panel to speak for, it's terrible to have to do this to people, but between 3 and 5 minutes on the topic. And our speakers are Professor Brigid Laffan, Chair of the Governing Authority of University of Limerick and Emeritus Professor at the European University Institute in Florence, Brigadier General Tony Cudmore, former Brigadier General in the Irish Defence Forces and lecturer in Maynooth University. And we will be joined online by Dr. Alice Ekman, Research Director at the EU Institute for Strategic Studies. So, Guillaume, I will invite you to take the floor, please. You will have a very attentive audience.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much for the introduction, Melissa. I'm very happy and very glad to be here with you today. It's really an honor to share thoughts on the European Defence Agreement's white paper.
Basically, I mean, we designed that paper to trigger debate in all member states. I think, you know, Europe is big. We have 27 member states. They all have their own history, their own relationship with defense. So you're not isolated in this kind of special relationship that you have with defense. All member states have their own relationship with defense. So I can tell you that the design of that white paper was a bumpy road to find a common ground between all member states to make sure that the reception of this white paper would be positive. That was one of the biggest challenges that we had to face. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a background about this white paper, what it is about, what it is not about. But first, I like to start with the context. So I believe the Commission, this new Commission, wanted to be to basically open the eyes when it comes to the new geopolitical context that we face, with on one side pressing security threats, Russia as the most significant one, that is long-lasting threats, multifaceted threats as well, with a conventional war combined with cyber threats, with hybrid threats, as mentioned by the Minister. And all that is amplified by US shifting away from Europe and saying we have different policy priorities. So Europe, you need to take care about your security. Ukraine is your business. Russia is your business. So the intention of the Commission was, how can we get ready for that new challenge that we face? So the message is really, we need to step up our efforts when it comes to our own security and defense. We need to do it by 2030, because we know, according to certain intelligence services, that Russia may be willing to test some of our member states in the upcoming years. So it's really an adventure that we need to do together. And I think the two key drivers are speed and scale. Speed and scale when it comes to addressing that challenge together. But clearly, this white paper is not about defining a common defense union policy, if you want. It's really about taking into account the specificities of each member state. And I think we've made that very clear in this white paper. What we want is make clear that member states are in the driving seat, and we as a Commission or the European External Action Service, the European Defence Agency, we are there to serve member states, to serve national policy agendas. And this is very much the spirit of this white paper. We can take the next slides. So the white paper is about putting facts and figures on the table to trigger a debate. based on our assessment of the security situation that we face and how we see it, we, meaning the Commission, in the upcoming years. It's about proposing an agenda on how we can work together to face and respond to those threats. And it's about proposing a strategic framework, a menu, different options that member states may be willing to activate or not, depending on your policy choice. That white paper, basically, there are three elements we're pushing in terms of agenda. One is stimulating the demand side. So giving more fiscal capacity to member states to invest in defense capabilities, in equipment. We see it's very much indeed in the air when it comes to islands, and we are very pleased with that. And I will get back to that. The second element is about the supply side. How can we ensure that we can stimulate as well the industry and make sure that we have an alignment between the demand and the supply side? And the third element is how can we stimulate the funding on the private side, the private financing? So when it comes to stimulating the demand side, our intention is very clear. We want to create conditions for member states to invest more in defense, in what they need for their armed forces. So here we have two main instruments mentioned by the minister. One is possibility for member states to use the national escape clause when it comes to the Stability and Growth Pact that would give additional fiscal capacity to member states in a very framed and conditioned manner. So today we have 16 member states that have activated that clause, more member states to come, but we also know that some member states decided not to activate that clause for good reasons. Then we have SAFE, the Security Action for Europe, which is about indeed raising 150 billion euros of loans to allocate to member states for them to invest in defense equipment. So those two instruments, SAFE and the Stability and Growth Pact, will create a demand shock, more financial capacity for member states to invest into the equipment they need for their armed forces. When it comes to the industrial capacity, here our intention is how can we make sure that the defense industry is able to produce at scale and speed what member states will need. So we need to fix that. We need to understand where there are bottlenecks, and we need to fix those bottlenecks. If not, they will not be able, the industry will not be able to absorb that demand shock and will deliver products too late when it comes to this European Defence Readiness 2030. Third element, which is about stimulating private financing. It's very good that we give more financial firepower to member states when it comes to the public investments. But what we want as well is to mobilize the financial ecosystem. So here we've pushed very hard when it comes to the European Investment Bank, and we have seen some moves on the side of the European Investment Bank that has narrowed down its exclusion policy. So now the EIB can do much more in support of defense. And that's key when it comes to the industrial ramp-up. So providing support to industry is key when it comes to developing more manufacturing capacity. So as such, it's very positive because EIB has deep pockets, but it's very good as well because it has a very positive spillover effect on the financial ecosystem, be it financial asset managers, private equities, venture capitalists. So we see a very high traction and more investors willing to step in when it comes to defense. That's very good news because in Europe, we have lots of new entrants when it comes to defense, startups that need access to risk capital or SMEs that need to get access to debt financing. So it's very good to see that we have the financial ecosystem behind us when it comes to defense. We can take the next slide. Just zooming very quickly on the demand side. Now, where do we stand? First, it's very good because we have a clear list of investment priorities. So we've managed with member states to define a portfolio of key capability priorities. And here I was flagging some of them that are very relevant for Ireland after 1.5 days spent with you. And I understand, it very much echoes what Minister said. So we have these maritime capabilities. We have critical infrastructure protection that may encompass sea cable protection, for instance, or space-based services. And we have AI quantum cyber, which is key because this is very much about the new entrants. And you have a lot of that industry in Ireland. This is one of the competitive advantages that you have, and they will play a key role when it comes to the transformation of defense. Stability and Growth Pact. Again, we have 16 member states so far that had decided to activate that possibility. This is very good news. SAFE is adopted, so we are now in the implementation phase. Member states will have 6 months to submit their national plans, basically telling us what they want to buy and with whom. And this will be the basis for them to receive loans. Again, it's really for member states to serve a national priorities or national agenda. So what do we want? What is the policy intent of the Commission? Is to support member states to work together, of course, plus to unlock up to 800 billion euros in support of defense in the upcoming years. If we take the next one, when it comes to the supply side, I mentioned, so we need to make sure that we have an industry that is fit for purpose. So different elements here I'd like to mention. One is simplification. You may have heard about that. This is very high on the agenda of the Commission with a big support of member states. Very easy. Here it's how can we ensure that our industry can get rid of admin burden that hinders its ability to ramp up or produce quickly. So in a couple of days, we will propose a piece of legislation to member states touching different EU legislations, the regulatory environments, to make sure that industry can produce at speed and scale. Second element is predictability. So industry, the big primes, for them to invest in developing manufacturing capacity, they need predictability. How much will I get? So now with SAFE, the Stability and Growth Pact, plus that list of capability priority, the industry will have predictability. So what we expect from the industry is to start investing in manufacturing capacity to start this industry ramp up. Third element is fixing bottlenecks. So again, we want to understand where the industry has some issues when it comes to developing products so that we can intervene as a Commission with some of the EU budget to fix that bottleneck. And the last element I'd like to mention is the transformation of the defense industry. So here we really want to take advantage of what happens in Ukraine, observing the way Ukraine is using disruptive innovation, rapid embedding of innovation in their defense equipment system, how they play with new defense entrants. And this is exactly this mindset that we want to onboard across the EU 27. So this is really this kind of transformation of the defense industry, changing the way we do defense. This is something that we want to push for the second semester. The next slide, and that's going to be my last slide. It's not about building Europe's fortress. We want to remain an open partner, ready to interact and team up with strategic partners. Ukraine comes first. This is our first line in defense. We basically want to treat Ukraine as de facto an EU member state. So there is a lot that we've put in the white paper. There is a lot that we are putting in different instruments so that we can really team up with Ukraine. It means further supporting Ukraine in terms of donation of defense equipment. It's about integration of the Ukrainian defense industry within the European defense industrial and technological base. And it's about associating Ukraine to as many as possible of our initiatives. Then we have Norway, same, very close partner, and we will continue teaming up with them. But then I'd like to mention UK and Canada. So UK, I had the pleasure to be in the Brexit team at that time, so a few years ago. So where we had to kind of come to an end when it comes to a relationship with UK. I have now the pleasure to see that UK wants to come back. And we're happy to tango again closely with, if not to rock closely with UK. But we see an interest. We see an interest on the UK side, specifically when it comes to the Security Action for Europe, this instrument. So UK is willing to step in. UK is willing to develop common defense equipment together with member states. So this is something, I mean, there is a nice negotiation to come up, but we're going to negotiate the framework for the EU-UK cooperation to be established as soon as possible in the upcoming months, so that UK defense industry can be eligible and can team up with EU industry to develop products. Same for Canada. We're going to have a summit with Canada on the 22nd of June, and Canada is highly interested as well to deepen the relationship on security and defense with the Union, especially when it comes to SAFE. NATO as well, I mean, this is our agenda since a while, so we'll continue as well teaming up very closely with NATO. The key word here is interoperability, to make sure that indeed we apply as much as possible the same standards, that we have defense equipment that speaks together. This is really the ultimate goal. So that is indeed, I mean, the presentation that I wanted to make when it comes to this white paper on the agenda we had ahead of us. But 2 points I'd like to mention in the conclusion. One is that indeed, as you said, I think for us, we're not changing the nature of Europe. That remains a peace project. So for us, investing in defense means investing in peace. And I'm part of that generation that grew up in a very safe environment. And I want to have the same for my 4 boys, my 4 kids. So it's for me like, you know, we need to think long term. So investing today for the peace of the next generation. And the second element is that it's going to be a bumpy road. It's not going to be easy. We're going to face many challenges, but I think if we manage to be all together, again, it's really for good things. It's really for good things, for protecting our business, for protecting our citizens. So I'm sure that debate will happen. It will happen in Ireland. It will happen in all member states. It needs to happen. We can't shy away from that debate, but this is for good reasons. So I'm an optimistic as well by nature, but I'm sure this is for good reasons, and we can persuade our citizens to come along. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. That was a very clear presentation of a very complex white paper. And I think the direction is clear and there's a lot of support behind it. The devil will always be in the detail, and you will be working on that for years to come. So I'd like now to start with our speakers panel. Can I say that for people joining us online, if you have questions or comments, you can submit them at any time during the session. Please note that both the presentations and the Q&A are on the record. And if you do want to tweet, you can use the handle @IIEA. So, Brigid, can we come to you, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is a very important debate. It's a particularly important debate in Ireland, given the distinctiveness of our stance on security and defence. So let me begin by saying I can't overemphasize the speed with which things have changed. If one thinks of the EU as ponderous, takes a long time, forget it. This is an EU that is changing extremely rapidly. The new commission took over on the 1st of December. The new president, Antonio Costa of the European Council, took over on the 1st of December. Since then, we've had an informal European Council on Defence attended by Starmer and Rutte. We've had the first Commissioner for Defence and Space. We have the White Paper on the 19th of March. And again, I was very struck, 16th of May, the EDA for the first time ever gets a high-ranking military officer in charge, not a civilian, but a military officer. So it is literally changing by the day. SAFE is done. There's many more things. It's just going at pace. Why? Because circumstances require it. And I think the White Paper does a very elegant job in setting out the why this is important, the what's important, and the how. And for me, the most important sentence in the whole paper is Europe must do far more if it's going to restore credible deterrence. Because without a credible deterrence, then Europe is not safe and the threats will take over. So we know the why, we know the what. It's all about capability, capability, capability. Capability in terms of the old-fashioned stuff, artillery systems and ammunition, capability in terms of the new stuff, AI, quantum, drones, and the interaction and intersection between old ways of doing defence and new ways, and then military mobility, the ability of Europe to get those capabilities where they're needed. So that's the what. The how is the tough bit. The devil is in the detail. And I would say the issues around the how will be funding. I think that the SAFE with 150 billion is a great start. I don't think it'll be enough, and there is 800 billion is what's talked about. So where's the rest of the funding going to come from? Will it require at some stage for issues that we will find very uncomfortable, like defence bonds, to come on the agenda, how to be funded, etc., etc. How much the private sector can raise funding for this, and how much member state governments or NATO governments themselves. So the whole funding area will remain central to the agenda, will be the MFF and all that goes with it next year under the Irish presidency. The second, of course, is, and you emphasise this, Guillaume, very strongly, and that is this must produce, if Europe is going to spend all of this money, it must produce a much more resilient, stronger defence industrial base. We can't afford to just buy from the Americans or the Israelis or the Koreans. It must generate the capacity internally in Europe to have a defence industrial base. And so I thought that SAFE was very smartly structured in that 65% of components have to be European, but it's open. It's open to partnership, it's open to engagement with others. But the key for the EU is, and where the EU, I go back to all the debates on battle groups, the EU should forget about battle groups. Let NATO take care of the command stuff. The EU, its big value added is the military industrial base. And that's where it is focusing. And I think that's where it should focus. So how to animate European companies, how to ensure that Europe benefits from the collaborative dividend, which we haven't done in the past. And that's the whole, I mean, interoperability. The EDA has been working on this, NATO, for decades. But now we've run out of the luxury of time. It has to be done now. I would say what is still a known unknown is how European publics can be persuaded that this really matters. Because there are trade-offs. If you're going to spend this kind of money on defence and security and deterrence, it means that there is less money available for other things. Now, there is an industrial economic payback in this. There is a virtuous cycle in this, but there will be tough trade-offs and tough decisions. And politics in Europe is highly fragmented, polarized, and difficult, democratic politics. So again, engaging with publics on this is really important. And then the final point I would make is that we live in such an unpredictable environment today that Europe may not get the luxury of the time to 2030 to do a lot of this. It may, we have a very unpredictable president of the United States, and NATO is the obvious command structure available, but we don't know what happens NATO. We just don't know whether it will experience death by 1,000 cuts or whatever. But I do think that the white paper is very well structured. There's no Euro jargon. It's well written. It's intelligible. And it answers the why, the what, and begins to sketch out the how. And the how is everything in delivering on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigid. Now, I have to say that it's not every day I get to be in the company of a Brigadier General, but today I've been twice lucky, because I'd also like to just mention that we are happy to have with us Brigadier General, Lieutenant General, excuse me, Brosse. You can easily pick him out because he's the one in uniform. As the new, relatively new Chief of Staff of the Irish Defence Forces. So it's a great pleasure to have you with us. Yeah.
And if I could add my congratulations also to the Chief. Great to have you here today. Thank you very much. And the section. it's very important that you're here on a day like today. I suppose just to follow up on what Brigid said in relation to the work that has been done in the white paper, I'd have to say compliments to Guillaume for taking on this role and within 100 days of the mandate of the Commission to be able to deliver. And I understand the complexity of it, because really what you've done here is you've brought together various strands and you've produced quite a coherent document which allows us to look to the future. And that's the context. I think it's important to see that the white paper in a broader context as well within the European Union, because we've had the EU Preparedness Union Strategy, we've had the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, we've had Protect EU, a European Internal Security Strategy, and on the 6th of June, a EU Blueprint in Cyber Crisis Management. So this isn't happening in isolation. This is part of a European Union response to the geopolitical situation. I think that's what's crucial about this, is to see it in the whole. It's not just about defence, and it's certainly not just about the military part of defence. It's broadening that understanding. And what's interesting is within some of those other documents that have been produced is this common theme of culture. And I just use terminology that's within them, such as developing a preparedness by design culture. And that's obviously coming from the Preparedness Union Strategy, and a change of culture on internal security. So there's a general trend and a theme right across the whole of government and whole of society, which we need to consider when we're speaking about this defence space. Now, the white paper provides clarity on the thought processes behind the decisions and on why and how to enhance defence capabilities in responding to these escalating security challenges. And two of the important principles of military operations are selection and maintenance of the aim and the maintenance of morale. And the white paper supports on both of these principles in that it provides specific proposals which confirm the intent, but also it identifies the means through various options and financial strategies, which together they create the confidence which contributes to the maintenance of morale. And that's the space we're in at the moment. It's ensuring that our armed forces, our defence forces are prepared for what's going to come next. And they can't do that alone. They can only do that in the context of the wider society. So I think it's fair to say there was no surprises within, and I'm not sure if you'd agree with me, but there was no surprises within the white paper. You know, in a sense, what they've done is they've brought various other pieces together and beautifully packaged them in a sense. But equally, there's now no excuse for not taking action at member state level, because fundamentally what you've done is you provided an instrument now for the member states to actually to address these issues. And I think it's worth just recapturing where the gaps and where the capability have been identified. They have come from the Council conclusions on the 6th of March, where the intent of the member states was clearly outlined. And I'm just going to run through them again for you. Air and missile defence, artillery systems, including deep precision strike capabilities, missiles and ammunition, drones and anti-drone systems, strategic enablers, including in relation to space and critical infrastructure protection, military mobility, cyber, artificial intelligence, and electronic warfare. And that's from the Council conclusions. So you've perfectly captured them in the context of the white paper. So what you're proposing is the creation of an ecosystem now of technological innovation within the defence industries, which will allow Europe to keep pace with the changes in the character of war. And the key thing is that you presented this in the context of collaborative working together within the European Union, which reflects very much, I think, what the Minister has said earlier. So the white paper has brought together these various strands of military policy thinking, and they align with 6 of the 8 elements of military power that they refer to: protection, sustainment, fires, movement, intelligence, and information. There's hooks in there throughout your document, bringing us right back to those 8 elements of military power. And the specific actions include, and I'm going to run through them very briefly, just to put this in context, is those in the capability gaps with a focus on critical capabilities, those ones that I've mentioned, identified by the member states. Supporting defence industry through collaborative procurement. Supporting Ukraine, deepening defence markets through simplifying regulations. Accelerating disruptive innovation, AI, quantum technologies. Enhancing European readiness for worst-case scenarios by improving military mobility, stockpiling, and strengthening external borders. Strengthening partnerships. So as the Minister has highlighted, The next step in this process is the European Council on the 26th and 27th of June. So that's back to the member states. You know, if we were playing table tennis, I suppose what you've done is you've served the ball, and now it's time for us to actually to respond to that. And we look forward to seeing defence projects of common interest, which will be determined by the member states and would give a clear indication of where we need to go forward in this. I suppose we've traditionally spoken about military capabilities in the context of hard and soft power. And I think the key now is to understand the role of technology and innovation to bridge the gap between the hard power and the soft power. And I think what you've created, in a sense, is a map of how we can actually undertake this. The key to military operations is, of course, logistics. And you can see logistics threaded right through this document. And it's great that defence and innovation are in your name, and thus they're in your mission statement. And thus, that is the key. It's not defence and sitting back. It's a case of looking to the forward, looking to the future, but also integrating that and more, because you're moving forward so quickly in innovation and technology, that you have to be able to actually also then take whatever standards are available to you. I think we can't any longer rely on standards being established and thereafter we'd apply them. It's a case of seeing what's available and implementing them. But to close, I suppose it's nice in military terms to think of things in strategic, operational and tactical levels. And I just highlight from a military perspective, the potential in the strategic are the clear political intent. The question of funding has been identified and opportunities and options have been put on the table. Industry and innovation are absolutely crucial to a successful defence strategy. And then the reliance on partnerships and building relationships. And I might come back to that again. But in the operational level, we're talking about the mobility, we're talking about readiness, including stockpiling, we're talking about security of supply and critical infrastructure protection. And finally, at the tactical level, the potential in air and missile defence, drones and counter-drone and ammunition supply, all of which go together to strengthen our deterrence. So I think I'll conclude on that, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. Now I'm very pleased to see we're joined remotely by Dr. Alice Ekman, who is the Research Director at the EU Institute for Strategic Studies. Alice, I hope you've been able to listen to a little bit of the comments, and I'd like to invite you now to take 3 to 5 minutes just to give us your thoughts on what's an enormous subject. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I was able to hear all the comments perfectly, and I would like to sincerely apologize for not being able to be here in person. I have a 6-month-old son, so that explains why. But I'm very honored to participate and to share our perspective on the geopolitical context, if I may, also to echo what Tony has just said, and also to build on the I think the very dense and very clear pages in the white paper on the strategic context, because it's not so common that I think the threat is so well identified in such a short amount of word. And I think I share a similar analysis. I mean, of obviously the aggravation of the threat, which is pretty obvious since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So I think we are all fully aware that the threat is real, it's here, that Ukraine needs support, that the war is long-lasting, and that, of course, it's a frame, of course, the need of defense investment and all the development that were indicated and suggested in very precisely in the white paper. One point I would add in the strategic, I would say, analysis described in the white paper is not only we are seeing an aggravation of the threat, but a global aggregation of threats. And this point, I think, is also very important to remember how much defense readiness is needed. We often in EU document or in member states strategic document, we often hear about simultaneous crisis and tension, or crises that are intertwined. So how to deal with this simultaneity, how to deal with this link that Indo-Pacific region is linked to also situation in Europe. I think this all is, of course, very true and very real. But I think it's important to take into account it's much more than that today. The threat actors are becoming more organized, more coordinated, and ready to support each other. Not only ready, but they are supporting each other. The white paper point at it, but I would insist on this because it's quite obvious. Russia has scaled up its war effort, obviously with the direct support of Iran, delivering drones and missiles to Russia, and also with the direct support of North Korea, which has sent, as you know, thousands of troops to Russia in addition to millions of artillery rounds, as well as many missiles. Why I'm underlining this? Because we are seeing direct support, but also less direct support from China, which has consolidated its trade ties with Russia and continued to organize joint military exercise with Russia after the launch of the start of the invasion of Ukraine. So we are seeing the emergence of a coalition of the willing on one side, but the coalition against the West, as we are perceived by several countries, is becoming a reality far beyond propaganda, communication, and hybrid threats in the broader sense. It's not only speeches, but it's translated into direct, substantial military support. You have countries who are substantially supporting Russia, are ready to do so, maybe less obviously or less directly. But this development, I think, is very important because we have to get ready for European defense, and not just taking into account what's going on in Ukraine. And of course, this is very important and very urgent, and Ukraine is obviously a turning point. But we are seeing a global polarization of security ties and military support that I believe is just emerging. We are just at the beginning of this trend. So this. Why I think is we are just at the beginning because, well, first because of the clearly stated ambition of Russia, of China, of the approach to time, and of the, because of the approach to time, the approach to money, and the approach to risk. It's not a cultural analysis I'm sharing here. It's a political, analysis based on the official statement. So several of my colleagues and speakers, they have underlined the financial and economic constraint, but also constraint that may be related to public perception and support. This constraint, at least the first part of the constraint, financial and economic support, certainly exists on the side of Russia, on the side of China. But it seems that they are ready to spend more and more, even at the time of economic slowdown. And I'm talking about this being a China expert by training. Russia has entered into a war economy, and it's pretty obvious. But often question about, we are facing a global arms race, but how much can it be sustained by countries who are facing significant economic constraint? We are all facing significant economic constraint in the global current context. But when there is arbitration to be made for certain countries, military spending in the priority to bypass US as number one military power. As you know, Russia has been very rapidly expanding its military industrial production capacity, with expected spending in 2024 40% of the Russian federal budget and up to 9% of its GDP on defense. China has now the second highest military spending in the world, surpassing all of the East Asian countries combined. And the white paper is underlining that very, very well. But we are really entering long-term, more than competition, rivalry between a security coalition, and I'm a bit concerned about our limits, because we mentioned money, time. We are facing an emerging coalition headed by several countries whose leaders are in place for long time, sometimes for deadline that are not known, for time frame that are not known. And last but not least, but this is related to the two previous points, we are facing a coalition of military support and solidarity, which seems less risk averse than we are. Not only they are building up military capabilities, but they seem ready to be using it much more much more I mean, directly and much more irrationally, I may say, than we are, in a sense that they are ready to lose money, they are ready to lose soldier people, they are ready to have their image impacted, they are ready to have changing public perception, but also depending on the political system. But we are really, I think, heading towards a polarization of security ties, which leads me to the point that Tony underlined very, I think, importantly, is the importance of building strong partnerships.
Thank you very much.
It's already quite difficult to of course to move together given the different member states' approach to history and defense in general term. But in any case, I think different formats have been emerging here to envisage different type of partnership on the European continent. But I think the white paper very rightly underlines the need to enhance security partnership beyond Europe up to Asia, including Japan, South Korea. And I think this is a way forward, not because solely of the transatlantic tension that we are facing and the need to diversify and security ties and reduce existing dependence, but also because of the coalition trend and coalition rivalry that we are witnessing, and that is, I think, is the frame of action that needs to be taken in the next 30 to 50 years.
Thank you very much, Alice.